and share your screen. I've
Yeah,
started
sure.
recording, so everybody beware that if you don't want your face or words to be recorded, then don't say anything. Right, Zoltán, over to you.
Thank you. Could you please stop screen sharing so I can take over?
I think so.
Yes, thank you very much. And thank you for the interaction. I've been actually with .NET for something like 2 decades as well, not continuously though. And when I reintroduced myself to .NET was about 12 years ago with Orchard, but that was actually even before Orchard Core. So let's talk about that. And why I wanted to bring this talk here is because perhaps those of you who are .NET web developers, perhaps you are still reinventing the wheel when it comes to starting a new project. So there are still things that are general features, even when it comes to user-facing or developer-level features, general features that you still re-implement either for every project, more or less, or just once for every project of yours, but you could use something ready-made. And this is what, well, of course, any framework solves. It provides you with features that you can utilize right away. And that's what also a CMS does, including a lot of user-facing features and including a lot of library-level features. So let's see what Orchard Core does on that front. Now, talking about CMSs before anything else, in general a little bit, why would you use a CMS to begin with? Well, again, you can prevent reinventing the wheel for every project. And there's a lot of wheels to reinvent, a lot of features. So even if you are working on more like application kind of projects, not like a website, but a web application, there's still a lot of generic features like user management that you would need. And commonly, a CMS is also kind of a framework. So it provides you with a pattern that you can develop your software in, the modularization, recommendations, and generally a framework for writing the code and also for working in a team on such a project. And of course, there are also other people using that CMS, so you can get support from a community or a company behind the CMS, if it's that kind of CMS. Of course, we are .NET developers, so there's already a .NET community, and if you are doing web development, then an ASP.NET Core community, but it's good to have smaller niche, tighter knit communities too, where people know each other better, they perhaps know the specifics of that niche better, as you can better collaborate. And this is pretty much what Orchard does, or Orchard Core, to be specific, does. It's a CMS, and it's also a little bit more. This is the tagline that we commonly use. It's also up on the website. You can read it faster than I can tell it, but let's dissect it a little bit to see what we are talking about. First of all, it's open source, pretty self-explanatory, and it's not just open source, but it's also community-driven. So while I'm from a company working with Orchard Core, we are not the company behind Orchard Core, and there's no one company behind Orchard Core. It's a community-driven project. It's also modular. So while there are a lot of features built into Orchard, those are all in their own projects, in their own packages when it comes to NuGet, in Orchard terms, in their own modules, so you can decide individually what you want to add to your application, and when it's there, what to turn off or on for one specific website or web app. It's also multi-tenant, and that means that from a single application, you can host any number of seemingly independent websites. That's quite useful if you have, well, more than one website or more than one web application to host. And it's especially useful if you are building something like a SaaS. In that way, that can be a public SaaS where people sign up and get some kind of application as a tenant, or it can be a private SaaS where you run a lot of applications for your clients that have some similarities. And with multi-tenancy, you can host them in a very efficient way. Orchard is also an application framework as well as a CMS. The mentioned points still stand. And of course, we are talking about .NET, the ASP.NET Core. Now, let's see a bit of detail, and let's see some numbers. Orchard targets .NET 6 and 7 both currently. Come November and .NET 8 will be out, it will target .NET 8. The logic here is that it always targets the latest .NET version, and if that's not the latest long-term support version, then additionally the long-term support version too. As mentioned, it's fully open source, and it's under the umbrella of the .NET Foundation, just as this meetup. It has thousands of commits, hundreds of contributors, and also thousands of issues, but they are actually being closed as well. So it's not just that people are complaining about missing features and bugs, but those bugs are being fixed and those features are being implemented. By the way, there's also about Orchard 1.x, the previous edition of Orchard. And that's where I started about 12 years ago. That's the original edition of Orchard. It was built on the .NET framework and ASP.NET MVC, the non-core version. It's also a huge project, but it's the legacy edition. It's still alive and it's still supported. We, for example, still work with it for certain clients of ours, and you can still notice it out in the wild on thousands of applications. But if you are starting new, you should use Orchard Core. And to give you a bit of a historical perspective, the whole thing, when we are talking about decades a lot today, the whole thing started, well, a lot more than a decade ago. The first commit of Orchard appeared in 2009 on Codeplex. And if you are too young to remember, Codeplex was Microsoft's GitHub before Microsoft purchased GitHub. And it reached 1.0 in 2011, and Orchard Core came not much after that in 2014. But we actually, or the community waited until 2021 to say that, okay, this is now production ready, it's a 1.0. If you may remember, between these two dates, there was .NET Core 1.2.3 with huge changes, a lot of breaking changes, lots of conceptual changes even between them. So the whole thing was quite unstable, and correspondingly Orchard Core as well. So we were a little bit hesitant calling it a 1.0, although I also used it in production well before 2021. And why I'm talking about the whole thing, by the way, is because I'm from a company called Lombic Technologies, and we have been working with Orchard 1 and then Orchard Core for almost exactly a decade. We started just the two of us, and now we are the biggest Orchard Core development team out there. We work with companies usually from North America and Western Europe, including companies like Microsoft itself, Dimensions, Willis Towers Watson, or even institutions like the National Health and Care Excellence. Now, why would you use Orchard specifically? Well, it's a great system. Of course, I'm biased, but one of its main points is that everything you know about ASP.NET Core and ASP.NET Core MVC still applies. Orchard builds on top of that. When you are working with Orchard Core, you are not creating an Orchard Core application. You are creating an ASP.NET Core application, and then you add Orchard Core to it. So it extends what's built into the framework, and it extends it in a lot of ways. It also provides some developer level features like localization, extending the ASP.NET Core localization, or logging, but also user management that hooks into the ASP.NET Core authentication pipeline. Of course, there's everything that you can imagine when it comes to content management and media management and dimension multi-tenancy and workflows and audit trail and whatnot. I will show you a few of these a bit later. And one thing that's quite important, especially if you are in more in the beginning of being a developer or a career, is that you can become a lot better developer when you join a huge quality open source project like Orchard, because it's like joining a big project with a lot of knowledgeable team members that you can learn from a lot. This is also my personal story with Orchard. I really became a professional .NET developer with Orchard, although I knew C# and also .NET development, .NET web development before that. And of course, we are not just talking about the codes. There's also a community. This is a picture of our last in-person conference, which was a while ago in New York. Since then, we are more online. COVID also gave that a kick. So we are living more online nowadays. It's quite a niche community with, I would say, possibly a couple thousand people. So not a huge one, but WordPress, but it's a very active one, and it's a quite helpful one too. Now, a lot of talk until now. Let's see a couple of examples. So now we'll show you some Orchard websites. Some of them you may know. And we can check out what others do with Orchard. So let me switch over to the browser. And this is not a very complex website, but this is a franchise that you probably know about, the Transformers one. This is a simple website, and it's pretty much a mini site. It's created by a UK company, actually, who work with video game companies and roll out such mini sites or such sites for marketing campaigns in bulk. Orchard provides some facilities to enable that kind of bulk development as well. Well, you may know the Royal Veterinary College. Well, they use Orchard as well. Not to mention that this website has a lot of cat pictures. So we already established that Orchard is really great. But Orchard can be used for more than content-heavy websites, more like web applications too. Fly Egypt is something that you'd expect from an airline website with a booking system. So it also has something that's quite heavy on the features, but it's not content management, rather it's airline booking. Now, as mentioned, some big names also use Orchard. House of Blues, which is part of the huge Fortune 500 events management company Live Nation, uses Orchard as well. And by the way, this is a multi-tenant website. House of Blues is their event venue and pub restaurant brand. There are something like 50 different venue-specific websites in this single instance. Now, local governments sometimes use Orchard as well. Santa Monica, which is part of Greater Los Angeles, moved and still moves their whole web presence over to Orchard Core. Yeah, so quite a sunny website. But when it comes to the US, even the federal government uses Orchard Core. Actually, Orchard Core and Orchard One both. We are talking about the Smithsonian Institution here, specifically their division called Folkways Recordings. And this is an Orchard Core website with a lot of content, a music catalog, as you can see, also music streaming and the store. Now, funnily enough, this was Orchard One. We had them migrated over to Orchard Core, but they also have two other websites, including this one for Folk Live, which is part of the partially partially part of the same division at the Smithsonian, but this is Orchard 1. Now, within the federal and local governments, state governments also use Orchard. In this case, the Employment Security Department of Washington State. And if you are interested in more examples, including more UK examples actually, then check out our Orchard Core or Orchard 1 and Orchard Core gallery, Show Orchard. Here you can see a lot of examples of Orchard websites that we find exemplarily. Among them, actually, our company website, what we recently moved over to Orchard Core from Orchard 1. And actually, showorchard.com, we also very recently moved over from Orchard 1 to Orchard Core, just like a week ago. So that's all good, but let's see Orchard in action. Let's see how you work with it, how you run it, what you can do with it from the admin. So now what I will do is that I will run Orchard Core locally from Visual Studio. So what I have here is, an Orchard Core solution that I generated with the code generation, Orchard Core code generation templates. And what you see here is in the root, we have an application, a web application. As you can see, it's a standard ASP.NET Core web application. What makes it an Orchard Core using web application is that I added these two packages here. This one here is pretty much everything in Orchard Core. So as mentioned, Orchard Core is highly modularized. You can decide on every feature whether you want to use it, and even within those features, you can extend and override all the things. Now, that's also a valid use case, but for now, I wanted to show you, well, everything. So this meta package pulls in every package of Orchard Core. There are something like 200 of them. And this is a pretty standard web application. Otherwise, we have also two other projects here, a demo project, a module project and a theme project. I will tell you about those later, and we'll also write some code. So now let me start this. And in the meantime, I forgot that I also wanted to show you something in Orchard Core source. So I will open that solution behind the scenes. But now Orchard Core is loading here. As you can see, we have an F5 experience, so nothing really special needed here. You hit F5 or Control F5 in this case, because I didn't really need debugging, and the application will run with iOS Express, or if you use any other IDE than Visual Studio, than .NET's built-in web server Kestrel, or anything else. And first, you are greeted with the setup screen. So let's see this in a bit more detail. Well, first of all, there's localization, as you can see, but I suppose everybody understands English here. Everything in Orchard Core can be localized. The UI strings, so the UI labels that come from code, as well as the content. And then we need to fill out this setup screen. So let's do that, and let's set up our site. First of all, we need a name for that. So let me call that demo. By the way, almost everything here can be changed later too. And then we need to select a recipe. And this is an interesting concept in Orchard. A recipe is pretty much a JSON file that contains content and configuration of an Orchard Core app. So if you have an Orchard Core app, you can export data from it into a recipe, and then you can import that recipe on another Orchard Core app. Or, of course, you can also generate such recipes in any other kind of application to be able to then import data into Orchard Core. What we are using recipes here for, though, is a little bit different. We are talking about setup recipes, and the setup recipes are kind of like templates for sites. So as you can see, there's a recipe for an agency website, like a company, like a software development company. There's also a recipe for a blog, which is, well, a simple blog. And then there are a couple of others as well. This is quite a powerful feature because apart from there being a couple of such quick starts that you can use to launch your first Orchard Core website, you can also create such setup recipes, and then you can then create sites in bulk, or you can provide the users of your SaaS with different pre-built web applications. Not to mention, you can also use such recipes to move content between something like a staging area and the production area. Now, this time, let's start with the blog, because that will be simple to see. You can also select the time zone of the site, but that's pre-selected by my time zone. And again, you can also change that later. And then we need to select the database engine we'll use. These are the ones that Orchard Core supports, and SQLite is what we recommend for local development, because SQLite is, just a simple flat file. You don't need to install anything for it. If you want to wipe your website to start all over, you just delete the file and that's it. So that's recommended for development. But for production applications, you can also use something like SQL Server or free engines like MySQL, MariaDB, or Postgres. For now, let's use SQLite. And then you have to create the defaults or the first admin user, which again is something that you can change later. And of course, you can add more admin users later. I will use the very safe password1 here, password1 exclamation mark. Now, of course, don't do that at home. And especially don't do that in production. And once I click Finish Setup, or should we run the setup, create the database, and initialize the whole site from that blog recipe, what we can see here. This is, again, quite a simple blog. We have a header with a homepage link and two menu items here, including one to such a simple about page. And of course, we also have a blog with a title, with a subtitle, and with blog posts, well, a single blog post for now, which has a title, a subtitle, some metadata here, and of course, also a content body and some categorization and tagging. So pretty much that's it. Let's now see how you would manage this site, how you would administrate. And for that, we'll log in to the Orchard admin area called the dashboard with the same very secure admin password credentials. And this is the Orchard admin. There's also a dark mode if you prefer that. There are also some perks of the UI here, but the most important thing is that we have a link to our blog here, including that single blog post that we have seen. And so let's check out the content editing experience here. And as you can see, this is quite something that you would perhaps expect. Our blog has a title, we can edit here. It also has a URL that we can edit there. A body formatted as Markdown, but it could be formatted as HTML, and a couple of other things that we talked about. And by the way, there's also this live preview feature, which is pretty cool. Let me put it to the side so you can see it in action. What this live preview does is that if you change anything in the content, immediately it will change on the right-hand side in the context of the site too. So quite useful. And then we can publish our blog posts. But let's check out, let's keep this open, but let's check out some other content here, namely that about page, that article that I've shown you on the front end. So let's see that. And the editor of the About page is quite similar as well. It has a title as well, and the permalink and the body, but this time it's an HTML formatted one with a WYSIWYG editor. And now you might notice a couple of similarities. Let me put them side by side. You see the title of a blog post and the title of such an article looks quite the same, right? We also have a permalink that's quite the same. And we also have a markdown body and an HTML body, which aren't the same at all. Now, what's happening here? What we see here are two content items in Orchard terminology. And these two content items have their own content types. On the left-hand side, this Man Must Explore, etc., is a blog post. This is a blog post which has the content type blog post. And our About page is an article. That means it has the content type article. And the content type is that definition, that schema that defines how such content items look like. And that's where we have to look to see why this title for this article and this title for the blog post and the permalink are the same or look the same. So let's actually do that. And I will now go to content definition here and content types. And here we have a list of those mentioned content types. For example, blog post. And this is the definition of the blog post, how all of these blog posts work and look like. This is the configuration of our blog post. And well, there are a lot of configurations here. What I would like to direct our attention to is this parts section here. This parts is about the building blocks that provide these features here. For example, there's a title part. That's the one that's responsible for a title here. There's an author out part that's responsible for the permalink feature here. And there's a markdown body part that, well, is responsible for this markdown body here. And these parts, called content parts in Orchard, are the basic building blocks. So you have these building blocks, the content parts, you take a bunch of those and you put them together to form a content type. And then you kind of instantiate that content type by creating content items. And this is what makes the Orchard content model so flexible, because now if I would like to remove the title from blog post, I can just remove the title part. You can also configure these parts. You can also add new parts. For example, if you now open the content type article, you will see that it has the same title, same author out part, but it has an HTML body part. We can use the same with blog posts. If we don't want to write blog posts in the Markdown templating language, we can use HTML directly. And you can also create your own content parts from code, or you can create your own content parts from the admin here as well. So this is kind of the main thing of Orchard, the content model. It's a CMS in the end, or how we use it rather, is mostly a CMS. So content is quite important, and that's where the magic of content management happens. But of course, there's a lot more. If we open the content items menu here, we see all the content items currently in the system. These were created by the blog recipe. For example, our menu is a content item too that we can edit. The tags of these blog posts are also content items, just as the categories, of which currently is just a single one, are content items too. And there's a lot more when it comes to the basic CMS functionality. There's, of course, also media management. I think it's pretty much enough to tell this about it. this is media management, how you would expect it. There's also search and indexing. This is currently not enabled because the blog recipe doesn't enable it, just some basic features, but you can use search with Lucene or with Elasticsearch. You know, Elasticsearch is basically Lucene in the cloud, a lot more, but that's where the whole thing starts. You can use Lucene locally or in simpler hosting scenarios, and you can use Elasticsearch in the cloud, and especially when doing something more involved. There's also user management, of course. So when we open users, we see that admin user that I've created on the setup screen, and of course we could add more users. User registration is also possible. And we can also allow not just local user accounts, but external user accounts too. Microsoft login with work accounts and private accounts are possible. Work accounts being Microsoft Entra ID, formerly known as Active Directory. But social logins with Google, Twitter, Facebook, I don't know what else is also possible. And it's not just about user accounts, of course, but also access control. So as you can see, this admin user I created has the role administrator, because Orchard has role-based access control. If we check out roles here, these are the built-in roles, or rather these are the roles that the blog recipe created, because this is something that you can create from recipes as well. And if you open a role, let's not start with the administrator because that's boring, that has all the permissions. But if we open the moderator role, for example, then we can see which permissions user accounts having this role have. Because here's the list of permissions in the system. And if you have a checkbox here, that means it has the permission. Well, it can, for example, access the admin area, and it has some basic built-in permissions, and it can also edit it. Oh, that's also actually a basic built-in permission. But one of these that it has is that it can also edit the details of its own user account. As you can see, this is a pretty big list of permissions, but this is only the tip of the iceberg, because every feature can provide permissions in your own code. You can also create permissions. You can also create your own roles. Everything that I'm showing you here today is extensible and flexible. And what makes this extensible are modules. How we foremost extend what's built into Orchard is in the form of modules. There are two kinds of Orchard core extensions. As I very briefly mentioned when showing you the solution, there are modules and there are themes. We'll see modules first. Modules are about extending more like the functionality of Orchard core, where themes are about extending the look and feel. And these are the built-in modules of Orchard, or rather features coming from built-in modules. And as you can see, it's a long list as well. Don't worry, these are listed in the documentation with their details. But one thing I would like to show you that was not enabled by default is workflows. And you as a developer would extend Orchard core with C# code from your own module mostly. But if you don't want to or don't need to write C#, then you can also use workflows, because workflows are some kind of visual programming. You get a canvas like this, and you can put boxes here and pretty much write little programs. Every such workflow starts with an event. So that's what triggers the workflow. For example, any kind of content event or user-related event, or there are a lot more. You can call workflows via webhooks. You can also extend these events. Built-in modules also provide other events, but for now, let's display a message when you publish a blog post. And for that, we use the content published event. configured to trigger on blog posts. And I will also make this the startup task. And then by adding tasks, you can do something. So when this workflow is triggered, do something in the system. For example, you can do, again, things with contents or users. I mentioned that this is pretty much visual programming, so that's why you also have things like for each and for loops and if-else conditions. But for now, we'll do something very simple. We will just use this notify task to display a notification. And here you can provide a message. And by the way, this is not just a simple string. This is a string that has support for the Liquid templating or markup language. Now, if you don't know Liquid, it's a safe templating language invented by Shopify, and it allows you to do things in Orchard like this, creating a message that includes the user account's name. So you can say, thank you, admin, for example. And Liquid is used for this in Orchard Core throughout the place, but you can actually also create templates in Liquid. So instead of Razor, you can create templates in Liquid. I personally prefer Razor, but for people preferring Liquid, that's also an option. And once we have the notification here, we just need to hook up the two. And now we have a very simple workflow. Very simple, but very useful as well, because now if we go back to our blog post and hit publish, well, our notification is indeed displayed. So awesome. One more thing that was not enabled by the blog recipe, but I would like to show you is the audit trail module. Audit trail is recording everything that happened in the system. So if you want to know who did what in Orchard Core, audit trail will be able to show you. And for example, it can record content changes. So let's actually check out that. And for that, under the audit trail settings, I will enable recording audit trail events for blog posts again. So now, if I go back to our blog post and publish it, this will be the first event recorded in our audit trail. And now, if I edit this blog post, like add changed here and changed here too, and publish it now, we'll be able to see in the audit trail log what actually changed. And once we open the audit trail menu here, indeed, we have these events logged here. Because again, audit trail is about finding out who changed what in the system. Content changes are quite important. And as you can see, content is also versioned in Orchard to facilitate that. So something that wasn't apparent until now, but when you change the content in Orchard Core, actually you create new versions. You are not overriding or overwriting the content. That's also a possibility, but by default, new versions are created. So here's our original version, which is, well, the blog post I first published. And then there's the changed version. And we can check out not just the changed version, but also what exactly happened when this change was done. Here's some metadata about that event. For example, who did it and when. And under the diff view, we can also see the changes between these versions, the differences between these versions in this nice diff view, like the changed title and the changed body. Now, audit trail can also get you deleted items back. So when you delete a content item, we call it remove in Orchard Core. That's actually a soft delete. The content will still stay there, and you can still recover it with audit trail. But it's also possible to destroy content completely. There can be compliance reasons for both. Sometimes you need to keep older versions of the content. Sometimes you need to delete older versions of the content. Actually, for example, GDPR in the EU covers sometimes both of these. Now, we have seen modules, but we haven't seen themes yet. So, as I promised, the other way to extend Orchard Core is by themes. And themes are pretty much the kind of plugins that provide the look and feel for the front end or from the admin, because you can have front end themes and admin themes as well. And among these, we have this theme. And this theme is actually the one that I created with code generation templates here. So this is our demo theme. And let's see what happens if I enable it. So now I will make this theme our current theme. And if you go back to the front end, we can see that, oh, it's beautiful. It's just beautiful. It's very ugly. And why it's ugly is because, as you can see here on the right-hand side, our theme is empty. It's just a skeleton of a theme that the code generation template created, but it has nothing apart from this single layout.liquid file. This layout.liquid is a liquid template. As mentioned, Liquid is one of the templating languages supported by Orchard apart from Razor. And this is just the basic skeleton of an HTML document. And that's the whole of our theme. And this is where you would start when you want to have a completely custom theme, completely custom styling for your site. You would have a layout.liquid or layout.cshtml and start writing your HTML, start writing your CSS, JavaScript here. Well, CSS and JavaScript in their separate files, but start to include those here. And even without anything like .NET hot reload, it will actually be immediately available. So if I add code here and refresh on the left-hand side, you see that, well, it just worked. If you use something like browser sync, then this refresh will happen automatically as well. So you can very quickly iterate when developing a theme. But there are other approaches available too. This is what we call the traditional CMS way of doing things with a theme, but you can also create a completely non-Orchard front end. You can create something like Razor pages or a plain MVC, ASP.NET MVC Core, ASP.NET Core MVC app that serves as the front end and just loads the data, the content from Orchard Core. You can also have a completely separate application for the front end, or even in any other technology even. Like you can have Orchard Core as the backend, as the content storage backend, and then you can have something like a Node.js front-end app or a mobile app that's the front end. Now, I didn't show you any C# code yet, and writing any meaningful C# would take a bit too much time, but I don't want to keep you hanging, and I want to show you how this title part works. And for that, I'm now opening the source code of Orchard Core itself. As you can see, there are more than 200 projects here. It's quite a big solution, but you can get used to it. And you can see examples for everything related to Orchard Core here too. So it's also quite a good reference. And in here, under the CMS modules, we have the title module. And well, this title module is the one that manages the title part. And actually, that incriminated title part is here. So this is pretty much where the magic happens. This class, this title part class, is the main thing behind this title editor here, this title part here. Of course, this is just the basic model of a title, but this is where the whole thing starts. And you can write such content parts as mentioned yourself too in your own modules. Now, to show you a little bit more, because that's really just scratching it, of course, where does this editor come from? And there's a corresponding Razor template, actually, specifically this one here. So this here, this input field is this input field that we see here, and this label is this label that we see here. And as you can see, this is not a full form. This is just a little part of this whole editor form. And well, this is because this is just a content part. This is just a part of the whole thing. This just provides the editor for only itself. And it's similar on the front end. So if we open this blog post on the front end, here's the display of that title. And we also have a corresponding template too. So this title part.cshtml is the template that runs this, the title here. And again, you can write your own things like this too. And furthermore, you can also override these. So if you are not satisfied by how such a title is displayed, although there's not much to be dissatisfied with in this single line of code, then you can override this from your own theme and display titles however you want. But we don't have time for much more, unfortunately. So some closing remarks. Now, if you want to host Orchard Core somewhere, you can do it anywhere where .NET runs. Orchard Core is cross-platform, just as .NET. You can self-host it, or you can also host it under IaaS. So something like Azure App Services is an option too. And such apps can be containerized too. So Docker, for example, is also an option. Furthermore, I mentioned that there are options to create a SaaS with Orchard Core. You can also check out our public Orchard Core SaaS.nest, where with 2 clicks you can create your own Orchard Core site for free. And that's a multi-tenant SaaS. So an example of something that you learned today. Now, if you liked it, like this, and I really hope you did, then here's some further reading. Of course, the Orchard Core homepage is probably the best place to start. You can also access the documentation from there. You can also check out Orchard Dojo, which is our Orchard learning and training website with a lot of free resources, including a weekly newsletter about what happens in Orchard, and also a complete tutorial series called the Dojo Course 3. Now, that's a video tutorial with some notes, but if you prefer to learn from code, then you can also check out our training demo module, What's Up on GitHub, which is an Orchard Core module, but its sole purpose is to teach you how to develop Orchard Core apps. It contains more comments than code, actually. It's pretty unique project on GitHub in those terms. You can start there, and by reading the code and playing with the code, because it runs, it's still a module, you can learn about how to extend Orchard Core. So that was it from me. Thank you very much for your attention. If you like to get in touch with me, feel free to do that. I would be more than happy to discuss any Orchard Core matters with you. And perhaps now we have some time for questions as well.
Hey, Zoltán, thanks very much. That's a brilliant introduction to Orchard. So, yeah, does anyone have any questions they'd like to pose to Zoltán?
I hope that means that everything was crystal clear.
Yeah, so I have one. If I don't want to push my way to the front, but if no one else has a question, you gave an example early on of Fly Egypt with
Mhm.
some quite advanced UI components and searching for flights and so on. So is what would be involved in that? You know, is that back to, you know, pure C# development and Razor? Yeah, what does that, adding something more complex like that look like?
Mhm. So in the end, whatever you do with Orchid Core, it's ASP.NET Core and C#. So everything that's possible there is possible with Orchid Core as well. And that also means that if you do something in the context of an Orchid Core app that doesn't actually use anything from Orchid Core, because it doesn't need to, then it's also just C# in the ASP.NET Core. Now, in that, I'm not the developer of that application, so I can also only speculate based on similar experiences of mine. In that, well, Orchid provides the content management features and the user management features, as well as the theming. And when it comes to the booking system, you would basically do something very similar to what you do in an ASP.NET Core MVC app. Perhaps the data storage is something that you can utilize for that in Orchid too. Now, as mentioned, Orchid uses some kind of SQL database behind the scenes, but it actually does that with a documents database approach. It uses a data access layer called YesSQL as opposed to NoSQL. And YesSQL basically gives you a document-based access to a SQL database. You work with documents and you work with document indexes when you want to query those. Documents are very applicable to a CMS use case because a content item is a document in that concept. For example, the title and the body should all be in a single document as opposed to two tables joined together. So you can use the same data access if the data that you want to store, even if it's not a content per se, is document-like, or a document model is good for it. Furthermore, you can utilize all the developer level features of Orchid Core, like localization and logging, other kind of data access. I don't know what else, or build your app utilizing Orchid plugins like our Azure Application Insights one. What hooks your app into Application Insights to send telemetry to it too.
Okay. So I'm going to keep asking questions if nobody else does. But if other people have questions, please unmute yourself and dive in. I was interested in, so I know that lots of public sector organizations will use things like WordPress now for managing websites, and I'm generally not involved in those kind of projects, but I'm interested in the kind of challenges that they have with managing things like when people leave and, you know, access rights and that kind of thing. I was really interested to see that you talked about the Entra ID or Azure ID integration. I mean, is that kind of I suppose like enterprise preparedness a real selling point of Orchid to organizations? What's the kind of things that people really get excited about by as customers?
Well, you know, when it comes to enterprise level features, it's an interesting term to use, being excited.
Right.
But what usually comes out there is Entra ID support. Indeed, that's quite important. Cloud support. So while .NET App doesn't need anything special to run in the cloud, Orchid Core actually has support for specific Azure and AWS services to make it better in the cloud. I mentioned Application Insights. Blob storage is one of these as well. In the AWS, it's S3, and there's something else that I can't remember. There are also these basic features that you need when it comes to a non-trivial web application, like very fine-grained and accessible role-based access control, as well as audit trail and content versioning. So these are the things that typically are a must when it comes to public sector clients.
Yeah. Yeah, cool. That's interesting. Thanks. Okay. Okay, and I suppose like a slightly different tact. So, what is it that you would like? So, I guess you're a significant contributor to the Orchard CMS, or yeah, a meaningful contributor. What are the kind of things that you would like to see the platform, going from where it is at the moment? What are the enhancements that you'd like to see in the next 2 or 3 years?
Actually, it's very little, I think.
Okay.
We at Lombi keep track of those Orchard core issues that are important to us, and there are a couple dozen. Those are things that we then either do or sponsor some other community member to implement. But there are only a couple really important ones, and those are all in progress. The last important one, now this is something that's quite let's say a low-level one, so probably was not necessarily something to get excited about or get end users be excited about, is secrets management, managing values that are like passwords. Now, we are not talking about user passwords, but technical credentials or certificates. There's, of course, the operating system certificate store that Orchard Core can utilize, but for things like OpenID authentication or maintaining the data protection keyrings of ASP.NET Core, we have a solution for that. We have an implementation for that currently, but it's not perfect. It can actually cause issues, not security issues, but you can get exceptions if you mess up something during the hosting that shouldn't really happen. But there's a community member who works on that. The work is sponsored by us, and most possibly in the next version that will be covered. And then I really have no huge asks. Of course, there are smaller feature requests that I would have, smaller bugs that need to be ironed out, but Orchard has at this point no glaring omissions, no glaring general ones. Of course, if you have some specific use case, it might not be covered, but it covers like 90% of every web applications needs out there.
And I suppose the nature of it being .NET and designed to be highly extensible, that you can add something yourself if it doesn't do it.
Yeah, and compared to how I believe WordPress is mostly utilized, with Orchard Core is not really that you take it as a box product and use it as such. Rather, use it as a foundation of your web project, and you always extend it in some way. At least you create a theme, so you have a custom design. But usually you also write some C# code to extend it in other ways. And
cool.
Yeah, the foundations are covered.
Yeah. Okay. Brilliant. Well, we have a question on chat from Dave Dev. So my understanding is that any NuGet package could be integrated into Orchard as a hybrid app for additional functionality. What if any challenges should we be aware of when using this approach?
Yeah, thank you for the question, Dave. Are you thinking about like just about any NuGet package or any ASP.NET Core specific package. In any case, that's possible. So when it comes to packages that are unrelated to what Orchard Core already does, then there's no challenge. You just use it. So yeah, I can't really think of any challenges there. By the way, Orchard Core modules and themes can be packaged as NuGet packages as well. All of our modules and themes are available on NuGet too. It can be a bit more challenging if you want to do something with what Orchard already does, specifically in the ASP.NET Core pipeline. But you can add things like middlewares without any issues because it's the same pipeline. Orchard is just basically just one middleware in the end. But when it comes to, for example, localization that Orchard Core already provides an implementation for, then it's not trivial. It's still not a huge challenge, but then you have to make a decision that, okay, do I want to use what's coming with Orchard, or do I want to use another package? Specifically, the Orchard Core provides implementations for iHTML localizer and iString localizer that load localized strings from PO files. PO files are an open standard. These are basically text files for localized strings. Now, if you want to do something else, like resource files from the .NET world, then you need to basically override what Orchard Core provides, or you need to not add the localization package that comes with Orchard Core by default.
Okay, so it sounds like it. So in all cases, it's possible. In some cases, if you're clashing, in inverted commas, with something that Orchard's doing itself, then potentially you've got a bit more work.
Yeah, or it's more like not trivial in that case. In some lower level cases, like dimension localization or logging as well, it's really just a matter of which package to add. So you decide not to add the package that Orchard provides, but rather you add a different package. You don't add the nlog logging package that Orchard provides, but rather you add log4net and configure it. Since it's ASP.NET Core logging in any case, there's nothing really special. It's just a conscious decision. If you want to mix these, or if it's more involved than just using a package because it's more involved in the whole system, like localization is, or especially like data access, then it's more work. But usually you can also use different approaches side by side. For example, data access, Orchard Core uses YesSQL by default. That uses Dapper behind the scenes. But if you want to use Entity Framework, you can do that. In the end, you have access to the database connection if you want to go that low level, and you can use whatever ORM or data access approach that you want.
Okay, I see. We've had a comment from David Sanderson saying, thanks, very interesting. So
I'm glad.
Thanks, David. I'd echo that comment as well. And I think the comments and questions are drying up now. So Zoltán, I think probably leave it there. Say thank you very, very much for your contribution and sharing this with us. I'm sure take it with us, and some of us will be using it before too long. So yeah, thanks again, and yeah, we'll keep in touch.
Thank you for having me. Bye, everyone.
Absolute pleasure.
Bye, everyone.
Thank you, Zoltán.